Hello, and welcome to Seriously Pointless Conversations About Culture, the podcast where myself and a few of my friends get together and discuss nerdy things. Just a reminder, if you like what you're listening to, please subscribe to Seriously Pointless Conversations YouTube channel, or you can find us on your favorite podcasting apps. Thank you for your support. Without you, none of this would be possible. Thanks for coming by. Now let's get into the episode. Hi, and welcome to Seriously Pointless Conversations About Culture, your Seriously Pointless podcast about all your nerdy and geek things across time. And
Hey, listen.
oh, are you trying to say something, James?
Hey, listen.
What are you trying to do? You're trying to get my attention?
Shut up and listen to me.
Oh God. Navi just went deep. James went angry there. I don't know if I should have called him Navi or James for a minute there, but obviously, guys, from our intro, our obviously disturbing intro that we've had there, so that we were going to be talking about The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. Probably one of the, if I would say personally, one of the greatest games ever created, honestly.
Especially for 64 era games, yeah, Ocarina of Time is amazing.
This was probably one of the pinnacles of game making, especially coming out of Nintendo in the last, 30, 40 years almost, probably, I would say.
Yeah, Ocarina of Time and its cousin game, Majora's Mask, were both really tours de force of what you could do on that hardware.
100%. So before we get into this, James, I know we just recently came out with our other November news segment. What have you been up to, man? Have you been watching anything new? I know.
We just did this an hour ago.
I know you're breaking the fourth wall, James. You're letting them know that we do these back to back. Have you done anything? Have you done anything new, James?
Oh, not too much. The new season, I don't know.
You're just going to make something up. You're like, I don't know. I don't do things anymore. Leave me alone. Okay, I'll go first. How about that?
You go first.
So that's why you got to hold a little back, James. You can't give them everything.
Normally, I plan this in advance, but I just wasn't ready today.
It's okay, James.
I've still got night shift brain, okay?
Give me some slack. I 100% give you some slack because I was totally there for years. So on my end, though, I have definitely been, my wife and I have actually finished up the new season of Made in Abyss. So I'll send you the link. I'll send you a link.
Yeah.
Be prepared to cry, James.
Okay. I appreciate a good cry every now and then.
It is definitely, it's got the violence in there if you want it, but it's got the same tone as that the first season had. But it is so good. It's bizarre, but it's so good, and I enjoyed it so much. And I had my wife saying, "God damn." Oh, goddamn!
It's coming from Jackie. That's a lot.
She was not expecting some of the messed up stuff that goes down. And about halfway through the season, she's like, everyone in this season is just, they're awful people. And then at the end of the season, she's like, okay, everyone's not terrible, but it's still.
It's Made in Abyss. You know it's all going to be awful.
Yeah, but people do have some redemptive qualities into it. So just be prepared to say to yourself, oh, goddamn. That's all I got to say. So. But it was really good, and I've enjoyed it quite a bit. So I am probably going to be starting up on some of the My Hero Academia anime, catching up a little bit more, because I know I'm probably easily... I haven't watched anything past the... what was the arc? The undercover superhero, the guy that does the wings. I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
He goes undercover in the villains.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't really finished up that arc yet, so I'm pretty far behind right now.
Well, the next arc is actually really good. It's kind of a villain arc.
I really want to watch that, so
it's very good.
That's my plan, to watch that, and then I'm also planning on getting into the new season of Ancient Magus Bride with Jackie, because that's one of her top series that she actually enjoys watching. That I think it straddles that younger, or scratches that soap opera itch a little bit, but it's also got some fantasy elements into it.
It's so beautiful, yeah.
It's really, and the thing on top of it though is really well done though. So I can enjoy that a lot about it. But so even though it's more about relationships and things like that are
produced by X Family as well. That was pretty good too.
I finished that up. That was really good. I've enjoyed that a lot.
It's got another season coming out this time too.
That's right, it does. So
it's all staring
But yeah, I know this is going to be a busy fall and winter season for anime fans. That's all I gotta say. So, uh, gaming wise, though, I've got a couple things on that I'm gonna try and hit up before we get together next month. Though, Kraken Academy, which looks kind of like a pixel art, um, maybe not really a roguelike game, but it's definitely more like self-contained areas where you have to fight and get through. But it definitely has kind of that. What is it called whenever it's the kind of the storybook games where like they do with a lot of the animes where they have those and they have
Like the Telltale game type things.
kind of things, yeah,
Choose your option.
yeah, kind of thing a little bit. It seems interesting, so I'm gonna try and hit that up and try to play that hopefully here. I've also got the Hot Wheels racing game preloaded on my PS4.
Which the Super NES Hot Wheels game, you were playing that one back
Yes,
in the day? That one was pretty lit. That was awesome.
this has a lot of those really random like cars that you can play, and it's all the ones that like there's like it's the Batman car, or you can play or you can play the Bane car. Yes, things like that. And so it'll be fun. I think some of the stuff though is locked behind a paywall for like downloadable content. You have to buy the download for like the different regions that you can play in and whatnot. But I probably won't touch any of that. But it just seems like it's a fun little maybe 4 or 5 hour time waste I can throw in there and just
Sounds like it'd be a lot of fun.
so, but yeah, it's all those weird tracks where like they loop around and do weird things that they shouldn't do in real life, and I think it'd be fun. So, but yeah, do you have anything slated on your plate? I know you said last time you said you were playing Nino Kuni 2.
Playing Unit King 2, gonna try and finish that one up this week. Going to be playing the Pokemon game next.
What Pokemon game? I haven't heard anything about a Pokemon game, James.
I know nothing about it. I think I'm gonna get the Scarlet one. I've decided. But anyway, now I've got to do some real life stuff. I'm gonna start a batch of wine.
Oh yeah,
Gotta work on the backsplash in my kitchen a little bit.
There you go.
So we replaced our stove, and of course the new stove is a little shorter than the old stove, and so a little bit more of the wall can be seen. And now I figured out something to do that's not going to cost me an arm and a leg. So
are you going to do this?
I'm going to do it myself.
So when I come over next time, are you going to be like Michelangelo sitting beneath the Sistine Chapel, getting paint dropped in your face?
I will.
That's what I say. That's kind of what I assumed. I just want you to come up and
tear to your eye.
But you have to get up whenever I say hi, James. You have to start cursing at me in Italian, though.
Okay.
That's okay. James is like, I have to learn some Italian curse words now.
I get
You just got to get mad and wave your arms around, right? That's what they do.
I can just bite my thumb at you, right?
Oh, do you bite your thumb at me, sir?
Or do you do like the ear thing, the ear pulling?
I have no idea, man. That's
yeah. I'm pretty sure the ear one is supposed to be like a deadly insult in Italy still.
I'm going to take your word for it.
The thumb biting is not anymore, but I remember the ear one was in a Stephen Colbert bit, so I'm pretty sure that one's still insulting.
Dude, I'm telling you, man, European like insults are way more nuanced than American ones.
I mean, they've been there for a long time. They've had some time to develop.
Would you say there's a culture around insults? Cultured insults?
So. I mean, it's the type of place where people are holding grudges for wars that happened 4 centuries ago. I mean, there's a lot of old memories in that place.
Sounds like the kind of place that my wife could go and probably fit in quite well.
She'd probably have a good time.
She definitely remembers the time I did not fold the clothes like 7 years ago, probably.
I think it's important early on in a good marriage to establish that you're incapable of doing laundry,
or folding it correctly, for that matter. That's definitely true.
Just lower those expectations a few notches.
I know, and I try, and I fold it, and I put it on her dresser, and then I come back, and it's folded a completely different way, and she doesn't say anything about it because she knows there's no fixing me. So, but anyways, that's a little bit what we've been going into. But this month, guys, the game review, like I said earlier, is going to be one of the legendary games that we have both loved and just enjoyed thoroughly during its whole life cycle. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time,
which still has a very active speedrunning.
Oh my god, yeah, so heavy still. So, quick little glurb about it. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time is an action-adventure game developed and published by Nintendo for Nintendo 64. And it was released in Japan and North America in November of 1998, and in the Pacific Asian regions the following month. Ocarina of Time is the first in this game series, the Legend of Zelda series with 3D graphics. So, that's just a short little glurb about it. So obviously, James, this came out around the time of how you would say our video game awakening. I would say.
Yes, this is at the age when we had enough money to actually buy video games.
Oh yeah.
You're old enough to mow lawns and make $10 a week, but you're not so old to have things to actually spend your money on. So we bought a lot of video games.
It's what we like to call the sweet spot in life.
Exactly. You're old enough. You have some hand-eye coordination. You have a little bit of money to waste on stuff like this. It's not like when you're younger when you just have to wait for a Christmas or something.
Yeah. Although to be argued though, the best presents did come around Christmas time.
That is true.
A lot of times, but this came around. This was ostensibly during our grade school era. Just before we got into high school. I'd say that this was what, 5th, 6th grade probably for us. I'm thinking 98. We graduated in 06 from high school. 4 years, 2002.
2002. So yeah, this would have been like 5th, 6th grade.
So yeah, this was the game, or one of the games. The era 64 era was a huge era for us in grade school, because I'm trying to think. I know you had a 64. Did Chris Sire have a 64 at all that you remember?
Sire had one too, yeah.
I know I did not, and that's why I had to go over to your house and bum off you guys, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. So this console was many a night, many a sleepover night.
This was the console
for our grade,
yeah.
Definitely our grade school era. So let me ask you this, James. Did you get this when it first came out? I can't remember.
I believe I did.
Okay.
I got this when it first came out. I want to say that they had an advertisement for this game in the Mortal Kombat movie. I remember correctly.
I couldn't tell you.
Or maybe it was a Spider-Man movie, or the Power Rangers movie. I don't know.
Yeah.
This was back when this game was one of the first video games to get advertised like in an ad reel for a real studio movie.
Very much so, yeah.
Ocarina of Time was highly marketed. It was huge, and yeah, I did get it when it first came out.
So yeah, this was one of the things. So even though this wasn't a debut launch title, which is what they try to do nowadays, and especially this is kind of where they started that. They started that with a lot of their systems, especially with like the Super Nintendo.
They launched with Mario 64, which was also amazing.
Which that's the thing that they really try to go into, and so that's something to talk about a little bit on its development. Though, was that they were really tried to mimic. I wouldn't say mimic. They tried to shadow this a little bit with the Mario 64 a little bit. They basically try to plane off of it a little bit to show, say, kind of use similar engine from what I remember. Mm-hmm. And so you can, if you watch it and you play it a lot, it definitely has very similar aspects on how it moves and plays and things like that. But it's also a different tone to it, right? If you remember correctly, as you were going through it.
So Ocarina of Time has a epic story, which is very similar in a lot of ways to Link to the Past.
Very much so, and that's the big difference,
it's
I think,
a classic
between
Zelda formula game.
Yes, and that
they kind of mixed it up more in the years afterwards, but this was pretty much a 3D version of Link to the Past.
Oh yeah,
big.
And that's the thing too, right? It's like that's the thing you kind of come to love and enjoy about Nintendo a little bit more.
Knowing what I know now about 64, they were already pushing the size of what those cartridges could hold.
100%, yeah.
In terms of a game of this format, the next one that comes to mind is like Donkey Kong 64, which had to have an expansion pack to even run it.
Yes. And that's something we're going to touch a little bit as we get into the development cycle of it, but a real quick overview of the story on it. So, I don't know, you know the story, but I want to tell the whole world the story. So, the story goes, yeah, I mean, it's a Zelda game, right? But in case you guys don't know it, and kind of where our titular intro came for this was the fairy Navi awakens Link from a nightmare in which he witnesses a man in black armor pursuing a young girl on horseback. Navi brings Link to the great Deku Tree, who is cursed and near death. The Deku Tree tells Link a wicked man of the desert cursed him and seeks to conquer the world, and that Link must stop him before dying. The great Deku Tree gives Link the spiritual stone of the forest and sends him to Hyrule Castle to speak with a princess. So as you go through, you find out that Link is basically going to be fighting Ganondorf, who in this game, he's not the same. He doesn't look like the same Ganondorf as he does in other games, right?
He has a much more kind of human or elfin appearance in this.
Yes.
He looks more normal and less monster.
I would call him almost kind of like a grotesque version of whatever race Zelda and Link are, I would call.
Yeah, he's like a Hylian. Yeah.
Yeah, almost. But he's kind of like, but he's definitely bigger and like he's got darker skin and he's got red hair. But so I guess you would equate him to almost like Dark Elves, I
Well,
guess.
because this is one of the games that had a Ganondorf character who is always featured as a wizard character. Usually he's a male Gerudo.
Yes.
And he's like a main character who is revealed to be bad. And then you find out in the end game that he's being controlled by this evil monster Ganon.
Yes.
And Link to the Past had this too, where like there's this 2-phase game. And I think even, the Zelda NES one had a second story too.
Yes.
Along the same lines. Which they haven't done that as much lately. It's been much more kind of, if there is a second villain with Ganondorf being the second one, it's someone entirely separate. It's not like a Ganon possessing them. No, it's good. It's interesting. And the game itself is divided up into kind of 2 phases, right? There's a child phase and an adult phase.
So did they...
As opposed to the earlier Zelda games, you had a light world and a dark world. This one has a child world.
I was going to ask, because I haven't played a lot of the earlier ones. I didn't know if they did that. I know they do... He definitely looks more like a child in like Link to the Past. But in like Zelda 2, whether it's that side scroller, he looks much more adult, I guess you would say.
I haven't played Zelda 2. I've watched some playthroughs of it, but it's kind of got a different structure to it.
So yeah.
This one has, same as Link to the Past does, the child phase has 3 kind of starter dungeons, whereas Link to the Past had 3 light world dungeons.
Yes.
And then the adult one has, 7, I think, or 6?
A lot. I know a lot more, yeah.
I think it's 6 adult ones, where I think there's 8 past.
But yeah, it's quite a big difference, and so I really like that they kind of put this element in there, that they take some elements from the old like SNES games and the NES games, and they kind of move them into this new era, because it does that, right? It kind of connects you with the old, but also gives you something new, right? Which is really fun. I think that's kind of something they move into with the story, particularly. And also with the gameplay as well, like they kind of move in with very, very similar gameplay tactics and things like that, and how the game moves. But if you look at it as you go through and play the game and go through the dungeons and go through the story, it's this is plot point by plot point at just another Zelda game, right?
It is, and that's part of the fun of these Zelda games is that it's a classic hero's journey type story.
Yep.
It always features a whole bunch of dungeons. There's always a princess to save. There's always a bunch of items to collect. And then part of the fun of the series is just how they rearrange them.
Yes, 100%, yeah.
And then how they kind of put a twist on it. So, like Wind Waker, for example, put it on a big ocean.
That's right, and you got to wave those wee chucks, James. You got to wiggle them. You got to make that wind
go fast. Yeah.
You got to make that go fast. I don't know how many hours I watched Candace play that game because she loved Wind Waker. So
Wind Waker also goes down as one of the Zelda greats. In fact, actually, there hasn't really been a bad Zelda game for a while, except for Spirit Tracks.
What are you talking about,
We're not
James?
going to talk about Spirit Tracks. Most people probably don't even know it exists. There's a good reason for that.
Even Minish Cap, which was not like one of the better ones, it was still pretty decent. I enjoyed it.
Minish Cap was a lot of fun to play.
I have my...
It had some annoying moments to it. Oracle of Ages and the Rod of Seasons were both definitely good.
Yes.
Heck, even the Cadence of Hyrule was fun. If you had played that one.
Yes, your beat game.
It's very short. It's not worth the price they sold it for, but it is fun.
They were literally like, we can make money off this. Let's slap Zelda on it. Smack. Take a Link and Zelda, and you're going to fight through the bad things, but with a beat. Dun, dun,
the reason I got it was because it's full co-op. So it was something I could play with my wife, and we could sit down and have fun.
Fair enough.
We had a nice evening playing it together. Cadence of Hyrule and a couple bottles of wine. It was a good thing.
I can only imagine. I've tried doing stuff with that with Jackie for years, and she's just like, I don't like these. These make my head hurt. I'm done with this. And I'm like, okay.
You could do a couple Stardew Valley saves. We did that. Anyway,
she doesn't.
We're getting off topic now.
She doesn't like to do that kind of stuff. But either way, though, so as you kind of go through, like you were saying earlier, you have this first section, right, where you go through these temples, you kind of learn as young Link, and you learn how to do the stuff right. You learn how the gameplay mechanics work. You learn kind of a little bit more about the world, because as you're going, even though it's Hyrule and you've been in Hyrule before, right? It still looks different because of the graphics. It's also still got like a different tone to it.
Well, and one of the interesting things I think they did with the child-adult thing is that there's a passage of time, right?
Yeah.
And so
they do like in this, I think it said it was a full,
like a 7-year time
7 year. Yeah.
And so there is some change to the area. So, like, the towns and stuff have different things. Like Hyrule itself is kind of gone to pot while you're gone. But also, like, the dungeons and puzzles, most of them are static. And so there is a size difference between child and adult Link.
Yeah.
And adult Link jumps further. He can climb higher walls and stuff.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of things you can do that you just can't do as child Link. But
hiccup these.
Vice versa too. And so even once you become adult Link, you still go back and forth very regularly.
Yes. So, and that's the thing. And talking about the difference in the dungeons and moving from one thing to another, that's something I was reading beforehand, was that they specifically were trying to, and this is what you're going to get all the time whenever you have a game that comes from Japan. They specifically tried to put in Shinto style, or have a Shinto background, essentially. If you look all the early dungeons when you're a kid, like the water dungeon where you have to go in, what's his face's belly or whatever it is.
Yeah, Jabba.
Jabba. It's all kind of bright and happy, and you're kind of like, at one, everything seems to be normal and happy and things like that. And once you go to adult version Link, things are not so friendly looking.
The world has been kind of corrupted, and that's part of the plot point is that, you were supposed to save Ganon as a kid, but you get trapped in the Temple of Time.
Yes.
And now you're 7 years later, he's been ruling the world, and everything's kind of just gone to pot.
Yeah, and they say that's
and you can see it in the world too, like the music, the color palette, everything is just much darker as an adult.
And they do that, I think, on purpose, because, like they said, they have a very much. They kind of, if you think about it, a lot of these guys grew up coming out of like World War II in imperialist Japan a little bit. So you have that kind of understanding, like, oh, well, our follies took us to the edge with trying to be this superpower. And I think a lot of them are now trying to kind of come to grips with, like, hey, how do we live in harmony in our own environment, in our world? And that's a very Japanese thing, harmony. And you kind of see this ebb into their game a little bit more too, and you kind of see, like, this is what happens. It's kind of like watching a Miyazaki movie, right? This is what happens whenever you don't sit in balance. Things don't stay in balance. Things get out of whack,
and so you have things like Death Mountain, the volcano is going nuts.
Exactly right.
The lake has dried up. The Zora's area is frozen over. Like every natural element of the game has been corrupted. Whenever you're in adult Link form,
which is like you said, it's amazing that they kind of throw that in there, and it makes it, like you said, since everything's been corrupted and changed, it also, like you said earlier, it kind of ratchets up the difficulty a little bit since you have these newer abilities, right?
And like when you're in the forest area, for example, all of the cute little animals have turned into werewolves when you're an adult.
Yes.
And
they're a little bit harder to kill, actually. So, and it's much more fun.
Shrubs are now angry and attack you on sight, and there's all kinds of stuff that goes on.
I know, and that's kind of, I guess that's one of those fun things to enjoy, because once you get to that point, you've kind of got a handle on the game a little bit, and it's nice to have a little bit of a difficulty bump. And I think this game does it a lot better than a lot of other games, even with the kind of drawbacks that it has on graphics and camera angles and all that jazz. So, but yeah, that's kind of our overview of like what we felt about it and things like that. So let's get into the development a little bit. So the development, Ocarina of Time was originally developed concurrently with Super Mario 64 and Mario Kart 64. But the problem they ran into was that where the Mario 64 and Mario Kart 64 were going to be exclusively on the cartridges, they actually had a peripheral. They found out that the game they were actually angling for this to be on a peripheral, that they add on a disk drive that basically did 64. I think it was 64 megs is what it was.
Okay.
And it was going to be a disc game. Actually, they were trying to get these disc games. Like they were trying to compete a little bit with Sony at the time, right?
Mm.
So, but I think what happened was,
and this is where ridiculous console peripherals were a big thing for a long
100%.
time. For anyone too young to remember this stuff.
Or 16 megs. I apologize. They're initially targeting 16 megs, but they actually increased it up to 32. So,
which I want to say is just about the biggest those cartridges would hold.
Yeah.
Full.
So early on, they really tried to make it to where they can have the storage constraints on the cartridge, and they were really trying to figure out how to work around that, because the way things were set up in like Mario 64, you have a lot of like open area behind you that it's just sky and doesn't take up a lot of pixels. Well, in like Ocarina of Time, you have a lot of overhanging overlays that do take up a lot more, even though it might just be, patterned
Mario
over.
64, part of what makes it feel expansive is that you have all these little subworlds.
Yes.
And people don't think about it because you just kind of played the game and that's how it was. But this whole portal to a different, smaller map area thing was something a lot of games in that time period did to save on space and save on power. Like Spyro's another good example of that for the PlayStation era. Is that you would go to these little mini worlds, and like you said, a lot of these were like a small island was all that had to be rendered, and then all the skybox was just skybox. It's empty space. It doesn't take much processing power. It doesn't take much memory.
Mm-hmm.
These little bitty islands are much cheaper computationally than trying to render a big castle with a field and like all this stuff that actually exists.
Yeah, 100%. So I think that's where they kind of had to make some sacrifices, and I think that's where because initially they were trying to, when I was reading into this a little bit more, they were really wanting to push it, Miyamoto especially, which if you guys don't know the name, he basically created this character.
Yeah.
So and Mario for extensively. So he was really pushing this in a particular art direction, mainly as wanting it to be a first-person view, because Mario, like you said, they were wanting to have something slightly different than Mario when it came out. And then Mario was a third-person view, right? You ran around, things like that. He wanted you to actually feel like you were Link, right? Mm-hmm. And wanted to have that view on there. But I think there was quite a bit of pushback from the development team from what I was reading. And they wanted to basically... They didn't want it. They wanted it to be just like with... Mario 64, the Mario game. They wanted to basically have it where you could go in and out of that from third person to first person view. And I think they eventually settled on, which is what we had in the end, which is where you can go between that combat.
It's a third person view, but when you hold down the Z trigger, then it goes to first person view.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of what the compromise was, because I think it was testing it wasn't testing as well. And I think they also found out that doing that constant first person view was a slog on some of the memory pool that it was doing. So
it's also just not something games did at that time, too.
No, not at all.
It sounds like there was technical limitations, which I wasn't aware of as a kid, but at the time, playing a first-person game was hard compared to a third-person.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the only time you really had first-person shoot, like you had Doom.
I didn't even play Star Fox in first-person mode. I preferred the third-person mode.
Yeah, and I even still enjoy third-person modes a little bit more, I think, than I do first-person. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, if I do like a first-person mode, I feel like I almost need to have like a pair of goggles over my face, and it like immerses me a little bit more. More of kind of like a meta thing, I guess you would say. But it just never really appealed to me all that much.
Link to the Past has like a weird hybrid to it, though, where it slips in and out of it. Like a lot of the game is in first person, but some actions will pull you out to third person. Like the Z target always pulls you out to third person.
Yes.
Like sometimes, like the bow is first person, except when it's not. It's a little strange how it goes back and forth, but it works. So
that's something else. Talking about the gaming, the weapon systems. this was something I really thought was really interesting. Was that I'm gonna butcher this gentleman's name? Was he is a actually this was Miyamoto. Miyamoto was actually really wanting to have is the Kenbara, which is the Japanese genre of Japanese sword fighting, which was actually pretty heavily stylized in a lot of their older movies. Ostensibly these were westerns for Japanese culture, essentially. And so they were very popular back in the day, about the same time as westerns were in the U.S. But he really wanted this kind of style of fighting to be, or sword fighting to be put in the game. And so they actually had more than 120 people, including stunt performers, used to capture the effects of the sword fighting and the Link's movement. And you see this a lot within the game. So like you see when he pulls out the Master Sword or whatever. Is it? It's the Master Sword. Yeah. Pulls out the Master Sword, and you can see him. He automatically takes that stance. It's just like the stereotypical stance.
Drawing stance.
And then he does all the every movement he makes. You can tell this is very much a traditionalist, like Japanese style of fighting almost.
Yeah, which is interesting because then you get a shield, and it's kind of more of a Western sword and boards type fighting style, but. And the sword play actually works really well for the game. It has a natural fluidity to it. It has several different styles of sword strike you can do, and they're all contextual, like based on how you're moving at the time. And so it flows very nicely, especially for a game from that time period.
And so there's another thing too,
which I think is better than some of the more recent Zelda games where you have motion controls. They want you to like shake the motion control stick in the right position.
Yeah,
it's that was one of the worst things about Skyward Sword. And it's still really annoying. Is it's such a motion control driven game that to play it you have to be shaking the Joy-Cons around.
And that's a limitation I think of them trying to integrate the new software and peripherals into a game design. I think it's kind of that's kind of a them issue, and that's just them trying to shoehorn a little bit inside to sell consoles, but it is what it is. So
part of the console.
But another interesting kind of thing that they developed in here was the Navi system was, for lack of a better word, basically something that helped kind of move you along within the story or help you find things.
It helped you like specify who you were talking to. Like if you wanted to talk to someone who was like up on a ledge, you would have to target them.
Yeah.
It lets you pick the one you're fighting. It lets you home in on like something in the environment you wanted to like inspect.
Yes.
Like it was a pretty core mechanic to try and make this 3D world thing work in a fluid way.
Yeah. And that was where the pinnacle thing of wherever her was the hey, listen, whenever you try to get her to do something like, or you put her on something, she would try to grab your attention on how to do something. And it was after hearing that about 5,000 times, you kind of get over it a little bit. But so
really, originally it was supposed to be just like a generic marker.
Yes.
And then they changed it into a fairy to make it more fantasy-esque and less robotic.
To be fair, I can understand that completely.
Which became the fairy navigation system and eventually became Navi, and then they wrote it into the storyline.
Yeah, and that's definitely 100% understandable, and she definitely has gained the ire of many a person throughout the years because of that just high-pitched voice of how she listens. I just want to know who voiced her, because I'm sure there's people out there just like absolutely hate that voice.
I could look it up. Yeah,
I'll have to look it up later just to kind of see. But
another thing they did was the cutscenes in the game,
which was something they didn't do a whole lot of. Even in Super Mario, they didn't have a lot of cutscenes.
Not a lot. There was a few.
Yeah.
At the time, a lot of cutscenes were like pre-rendered with motion capture. They may be in engine or not. Final Fantasy is a good example of this. Something from the same time period.
Very much, yeah.
They had pre-rendered full motion video for all the cutscenes, which is why it looks totally different than the in-game stuff.
Yes.
And that stuff uses up an awful lot of space, which is part of the reason why Final Fantasy was on 4 discs.
Yeah.
Which is way, way, way more space than this game had, which was like 32 megabytes.
Yep. It's also another reason why they're still doing that today. Like you have, even with the new Final Fantasy remakes, it's literally going to be broken up into 3 parts.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. So
And so this game used in-engine cutscenes. They weren't pre-rendered.
yes,
All they did was they recorded a series of instructions for the models, and then they kind of acted out for you whenever it comes up. It takes more computing power, but it takes a lot less space.
Yeah, and that is something that was pretty, like you said, pretty unique for the time because they didn't do it a whole lot, and so it required them to really build up on the camera, the in-game camera that they had initially for the Mario 64. I believe they used a different one. I'd have to look it up again, but I believe they used a different Mario, a different system. Yeah, okay. So that's what they did. They did upgrade it a little bit. So they did use different engines in regarding the camera control. Major difference was between the two is the camera control. In this one, in this one, they actually had significantly less camera control, and that it's largely controlled by AI as opposed to in 64, it's controlled by the player. So I think they could optimize it a little bit more, and they were able to write it in a little bit more, and it required less guesswork on the player's part of trying to hey, this is the best angle, this is not the best angle. But it was also could be detrimental if you hit an angle at a right point. But I think doing that allowed them to put in those big cut scenes, like you said, because they could control it a lot more.
Yes, there's 90 minutes of cutscenes in this game, which is absolute insanity.
It's darn near to the point of Final Fantasy level cutscenes.
It's a full movie's worth of cutscenes.
So I enjoyed that. That's one of the things I did enjoy playing it quite a bit with you, was that they had those cutscenes. I could kind of take a break from my thumbs, take a break, especially with the way that controller was set up.
The gameplay, I think we've talked about a bunch of that already.
Did a little bit of gameplay, little things like I said that they added differently. Other than was the Z targeting, we've talked about that a little bit more.
Projectiles and bombs in a 3D space were interesting. So, for example, the arrows you shot from your bow had physics, and they fell over time.
Yes.
The bombs would go different distances depending on how fast you were running. There was some stuff in there that wasn't really done yet, and it's because we were first entering this 3D game space.
And so the other big thing that they threw into this was the playing on the ocarina, right?
Yes.
So to have different things happen within the game,
which was originally intended to be way more complicated than it ended up.
Thank God.
And in fact, actually, if you go in game and you just pull up the ocarina, the controls that you use to play the in-game songs are the 6 buttons on the front of the controller.
Yep.
But you can still access the original controls and use the L and R buttons to pitch yourself up and down. And so the ocarina will play a full musical range. It plays a full octave with half steps.
That's really cool.
And so
I didn't know that.
You can play full songs on the ocarina in game, which was originally you were intended to play more complicated music, and they eventually decided to cut it down and make you play the 6 notes, and then it kicks in with the rest of the song.
That's really cool. I enjoyed that. So, but apparently, within this, you're required to learn the 12. I think it was up to 12 different melodies that help you solve music-based puzzles and things like that, and help you teleport and things like that. That was a really cool thing that they threw in there that they had not done, and I think they do that in any other games?
That's been reprised, I think, in most Zelda games since then.
So it's a staple now.
Majora's Mask had the same thing, and a lot of the Zelda games.
Yeah, I definitely remember them.
Not all of them feature them as something you can just whip out and play, but Skyward Sword had finding sacred songs as a key mechanic, though it mostly was kind of done once to unlock
I never played Skyward Sword. That's my downside. Downfall.
They released a remake for the Switch, which is pretty playable.
Okay.
Some of the features translate awkwardly, but most of it's very, very playable. I enjoyed it. It's fun.
I might have to get into it.
It's not the best Zelda game, but it's fun.
I will have to go in there and check it out.
Wind Waker used the song thing extensively.
I do know that, yeah. So that was pretty cool that they enjoyed that, that they put that mechanic in there that lasted so long. So, well, obviously this all culminated to having it been released. Obviously it didn't come out initially at the same time as Mario 64 like they were planning to. It got pushed back several times, and eventually they actually decided they were going to have it release in 1998. So I think it was originally slated for 95 '97 is what
It
they
was
were
supposed
trying
to
to.
be a '97 Christmas release,
So,
and didn't quite make it.
which is
Like I
understandable.
said, Miyamoto blamed it later on Yoshi's story being prioritized, which Yoshi's story was highly publicized as well.
Yes.
If you remember the mania around that, the special edition white and black Yoshi plushes,
Yes.
that you had to buy a physical copy of the game and send in the part of the box to get the Yoshis. I mean, it was a whole thing, which it turned out to be a really good game too. But
it was really good. Yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit actually. So, but obviously, this was one of their biggest hits that they had gone to. So, it says here, so throughout the '90s, Nintendo 64 was said to lack hit first party games. Next generation wrote that Nintendo absolutely can't afford another. And all right, can't afford another holiday season without a real marquee title in Zelda, and that Zelda was one of the most anticipated games of the decade, upon which Nintendo's 64 fate depended. Apparently, Nintendo spent $10 million on their marketing, like you were saying. It was just they just flushed a ton of it out there. And whenever they finally got in pre-orders, one of which you could get the a limited edition box with a golden plastic card redeemed collector's edition, and
which is a kickback to the collector's edition for the NES version of the game.
And other things too. Then they also came out with it was included with the gold colored cartridge, which was was the first time that we'd ever seen something like this, right? You see it later on with things like GoldenEye.
Well, they did before. The NES version had a gold cartridge.
Oh, it didn't. I apologize.
And the Super NES version, I don't think the Super NES version had a gold cartridge, but the original NES game had a gold.
So that was a callback to them.
It was a callback, yeah.
Oh wow, so that's pretty cool then. So I didn't even know that. So obviously, so this was one of the big things, selling points to get a oh wow, what am I talking? The units out the door is what I'm trying to say. So,
Yeah.
So apparently this was just one of the best-selling games that they had sold, or pre-selling games that they had ever had. Obviously, it was a huge blockbuster hit, from what I gathered, and I couldn't find any actual numbers on this.
It would be hard to get at this point because the game's been re-released a couple times now.
And I think that's what was kind of what I was running into. But from what I gathered, it was it was akin to the Mario 64 launch.
It was a runaway game, and in a lot of ways, it saved the console.
100%, yeah.
Which this is a recurring story for Nintendo over the years, and we've talked about it more than once before.
Yeah.
They have a tendency to bring out a new console. They'll put out a really amazing Mario game, and then nothing.
Yes.
And then nothing. And then there'll be a Zelda game or something, and then there'll be nothing.
Yeah. You'll have an upsurge in popularity because people love that new Zelda game, and then it'll dip back down again.
And that's part of what's made the Switch better for them is in between their amazingly consistent first-party releases, there's indie games and stuff you can play.
Yes. And I think they've been better about being open to letting people, indie games in particular, come onto their platform and port onto their platform.
Because that's the most impressive thing about Nintendo is that their first-party game titles are consistently, decade-defining games.
Yeah.
Since their beginning, they've consistently pushed the envelope and put out really amazing stuff, but you have to wait for it.
Yes,
they're definitely a long time for it.
They're definitely one of those boutique stores that just doesn't put out things very often. So
we'll do it when we're ready.
I know. So that's one of those really cool things that you just really see that it's been revamped. Was it more than once, or they did a real? They trying to remember if they did
They released an HD version for the GameCube.
Yes, I'm trying to remember.
I don't remember if it was available on the Wii U store or not. A lot of these SNES games were on the Wii U store. And then I think it's on the Switch now too.
I know they definitely came out with the original 64 version on
I think it's on the Nintendo Switch Online right now.
Which it was not very good.
Plus the booster pass.
Oh God, don't get me started.
Hey, you know what? If you want to play a Zelda game,
you can find it.
Play a Zelda game.
Yeah, I'm out of the mind is if they want to charge me $10 a year to play that on there, I'm just gonna find it someplace else.
It's fine.
Or Or
I haven't bought the booster pass for the Switch yet, but I'm sure one day I'll feel like I need to play a Zelda game, and I'll probably buy it. For
I just think that is your Pokemon game will run out, won't it, James?
It'll run out of it.
Well, I guess so. Overall, James, how many Navis out of 10 would you give this?
If you're going to call the Navi, then I have to give it like a 2, but it's a 10 out of 10 game.
Yes, it is. I wouldn't give it any Navis. If it was my choice, there would be no Navis.
I'll give it 10 Sorayas out of 10.
Okay, acceptable. Very acceptable. Oh my god, you and your Sorayas.
But not Princess Ruto, because she was a little creepy about it.
A little creepy. So I would probably give this, like I said, I would give this an 8 out of 10. I love this game, but also, like I said, I'm not nearly as much of a Zelda fan as you are, and I definitely can tell, like when I went back and played it for a little bit this last, about 2 weeks ago, I think I played it ago, just a little bit of it. It definitely shows a little bit of wear and tear, but it's still a classic game.
It's a product of its age. It's not.
That's what I'm saying.
It's not the shiny box it used to be.
And that's okay, and I'm okay with that, and I can enjoy it for what it is.
Like just from a technical aspect, even though Majora's Mask is on the exact same engine, it has a lot more polish.
Oh yes, 100%. Well,
the time turning back mechanic isn't for everybody, but like from a mechanical standpoint, it's way more polished.
Oh, way more, 100%. So, well, if you guys have not played this yet, if you're one of the 10 people in the world that haven't got a chance to touch this game, go out, find it, guys. Like I said, you can find it, on, we said earlier, Switch Online. If you want to play it on there, on your Switch console, you can find it. There's tons of ROMs out there for this. You can find it. But like I said, no matter how you do it, check it out. It's a blast. We loved it to death. So, James, I just want to say thanks for coming in and kind of, wringing our hands, weeping a little bit, broing out a little bit. Let's do that. We've been broing out a little bit about one of your favorite franchises ever. Because I know you love Zelda to death. Between Zelda and Pokemon, if they came out with a game every year between the two of these, you would probably be just a pig in mud.
I'd be a happy camper. Yeah,
I know, 100%. So. But guys, if you enjoyed this episode, just let us know if you want us to hit more Zelda-related topics, things like that. If you want us to just do exclusive Nintendo stuff, which James would probably be okay with, let us know.
Gotta mix it up, but Nintendo stuff is fun.
Either way, guys, I just want to say thanks for coming in and listening to us, and we will see you next month for another hopefully wonderful review. So, All right, see you later, guys. Bye. If you're interested in keeping up to date with new episodes on our channel, add us on any of your favorite podcasting apps, or subscribe to our YouTube channel at Seriously Pointless Conversations. If you have questions or concerns, please email us at seriouslypointlessconvo@gmail.com. We appreciate any feedback. Thank you for listening to our show.